can seems to have dried. When I put my hand inside the mortar hole, it's not grossly wet anymore. It's still really heavy, which isn't a surprise. I think what we'll do is we'll take it out and give it a little test fire here. Using this thing's going to consume a tremendous amount of charcoal, and we're also leveling up from this size to this size of crucible, which means it's going to hold a lot of metal. My thought is we'll put some charcoal in it and let it burn for a bit to get rid of that tube. Then we'll follow it up with a little more pewter. Then, once things are really ripping, we'll put some aluminum in there. And at the end, when everything's really baked hot, I'll just try a little copper and see if I can get a test melt. Probably use the small crucible for that. Minimal amount of metal just to see if I can make it melt for this first time. I'm going to use this different location specifically because I don't want the big can so close to my house. Plus I'm having my driveway replaced, so I don't really care what happens to it right now. That's about 3 loads worth of charcoal in the old system. Let's light her up. No air yet. We'll just give her a gentle start here. I've still got cardboard tube and I've got plastic on the top. I'm expecting to lose both of those. Okay, adding air, and we'll see what happens. We'll put the top on and go from there. For about the first 5 minutes, it smoked really very unattractively. It does seem to have settled down a little bit. So let's watch this tin go. That's fast and that's hot. It's not even fully stoked yet. Nine biscuits out of a half full crucible, so that gives us some idea of how much capacity this thing has. Okay, let's load her back up and try some aluminum. So let's take a look at the results of our first aluminum melt. It's a very full crucible. Lots and lots of aluminum in it. It took a long time to melt this much metal, and we'll have a little post-mortem about the function of the foundry, but let's go ahead and pour off this aluminum here. Heavens to Betsy. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and a half. It's kind of hard to pour. I'll throw a couple of those back in to try to get better biscuits out of them. Okay, it's time to pour off our second melt of aluminum. Learned a lot during this process, which we'll go over in a minute. Let's just go ahead and get this poured off and count up where we stand. Still can't pour it very well. We'll put it back in to reheat a little bit to empty that stuff out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, plus 13 and a half the last time is 28 biscuits. We're going to pour off one more time here with this remnant melt of aluminum, and then we'll try copper. Let me do this, and then I'll give you a soliloquy about the question on copper. We'll try this next. So Before I ever fired this thing up, I was really quite sanguine that I could melt this copper, but frankly, I'm really not so sure now. We'll go into the technical reasons in a little bit, but first let's put this in and see what happens. It's going to take a long time if it melts at all. There we have it. Nothing to write home about. Tin. Quite heavy tin. Well, it's pewter. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the state fair where they put the pork sandwiches in front of the pork tent and the beef sandwiches in front of the beef tent, but I decided I would bring the aluminum biscuits back to sit in front of family. This basket of biscuits includes a little bit of scrap aluminum that I had, but most of it is composed of a chair that used to sit around this table. This is the part I didn't melt yet. And then I have this from my copper melting. So it wasn't going to melt. It just wasn't going to melt. So I threw a biscuit of tin in there. And this is what poured back out. It's very strange. I don't know why it's got that layering in it. I doubt that that's inside the actual metal. I'll shine it up and see. So whatever this is, it's some form of bronze because it's tin and copper. Who knows how much. It's kind of interesting the way it kind of ate away the copper. All this stuff was folded up. Other than the parts that actually dissolved into the tin, the only thing I managed to do was heavily oxidize the copper. So if I wanted to produce heavy amounts of copper oxides, I'd be happy. But of course, that's not what I want to do. Other than the fact I'm an idiot, what did I learn today? Well, let's go through a couple things. First, the big can did melt metal in this, as opposed to this. I had a hard time melting anything in this small foundry. There just wasn't enough room for enough charcoal. So that's a win. The other thing I learned was that when this thing's full, it's incredibly difficult to maneuver. You really need to not overfill your crucible when it's that big. Okay. It readily melted the tin and the aluminum. It was a little slow on the aluminum. So one of the things that I learned was that the thing is really kind of too deep. As long as you have enough depth to get the crucible surrounded by red hot and white hot charcoal, you don't really need all that depth. And it doesn't really help to just sit the crucible on top of a pile of really hot charcoal. It needs to be in the charcoal. So it's really kind of too deep. Now there's really nothing I can do about that in this iteration, but it is something to remember. And then, even though I thought I had enough air, I'm pretty sure I don't have enough air. I never saw more than about a third of the charcoal bed get really red hot, and I never got that white hot glow that I have gotten. Well, okay, highly orange hot glow that I've gotten in the small foundry. I never saw that in this foundry. So I'm really going to have to up my game on air. At least double, maybe triple the amount of air. I really think I can probably still get to copper temperatures, but I'm going to have to try a couple of different interventions. So there's my top. Most but not all of the plastic burned off. Seems to have held up well. It's got one crack, which is unsurprising, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Look down the throat of it, it seems to have held up well. Tube's mostly gone. Actually, surprisingly not completely gone, but mostly. A lot of metal in the bottom of the can. I mentioned that the charcoal was burning unevenly, and that caused the crucible to kind of fall over sideways, and it spilled more metal than I realized. I thought I'd spilled a little bit, but really quite a great deal, so we'll wind up having to remelt all this. A particularly interesting piece of metal that I pulled out of the foundry, because it was inside the end of the pipe, like that. That's what happens when you don't control your metal and you let it flow down into the vessel. You get things like this, and I'll tell you right now, this definitely restricted my flow of gas. That might have been enough to really impair the ability of the furnace to work. Look, it's more than half the pipe. Really have to learn how to exercise a little bit more discipline around my metal use. Still going to add another support, because I really do think that I don't have enough air flowing to this thing. Anyway, that's it for this video. Please feel free to like and subscribe, tell your friends. The big can is not dead, but it has not yet been angry, so we will yet live to fear the big can. We just need to help it along a little bit. Thank you very much.